So we're doing Parshas Toldos on 124, and we're moving along in the generations. We had Avram, and then we have Yitzchak, and Yitzchak got married, and now Yitzchak and his wife, right? Of course, as all of our forefathers and mothers did, they all had problems having children. Rivka as well has problems having children, but here we find that she finally does get pregnant. And it begins, Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. These are the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. Avram holy is Yitzchak, and Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. The first question, of course, is why does it tell us all that? I mean, if these are the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham, why does it tell us that Abraham is the parent of Yitzchak? We already said his name is Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. So wouldn't we know that Abraham's his father? Why does the Torah tell you that? And the Torah never has an extra letter. It certainly doesn't have an extra word, and it never has an extra sentence. So why would it do that? So the commentaries tell us it's because the Rashi explains, when you find it in a number of places, that the commentaries say that what's called the Letzonei Ador, the cynics of the generation, would say that it wasn't Abraham who was his father. Abraham thought he was his father, and therefore he was known by his mother's husband's name, but in reality we know, the cynics said, that it wasn't, because Sarah was kidnapped by Avimelech, and Avimelech, right, had her alone in his royal chambers at night, and it says because God made him sick, he wasn't able to rape her, to have relations with her, so therefore, but the world doesn't know that. So they would say Yitzchak was not a son of Abraham. Abraham couldn't have kids. So how, right, they would say they can't have children together. So suddenly she has a child that's got to be from Avimelech. So that's the, it says in the Torah, it tells you that this is Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. That's how he's known. But not only is he known that way, Abraham is the father of Yitzchak. And it says that God made a special blessing in that Yitzchak looked exactly like Abraham. Exactly. In other words, usually a child will resemble his father. You can tell they're related. But once in 100,000 cases or something, the child looks so much like the father or the mother that it's like impossible to think differently. In this case, Yitzchak looked exactly like his father. And on the basis of this, it says that it was in order so that the cynics, or what they call Letzonei Hador, the cynics of that generation, would not be able to say that Yitzchak is not the child of Abraham. Because, of course, why would they care? What's the difference? Yeah, Abraham, let's say he's not the child of Abraham, but Abraham raises him, and he teaches him to be a monotheist. The idea is that Abraham, right, was given a promise by God. God said, you are going to have a child who will inherit you. And Yishmael is not the one who inherits him. Therefore, it had to be another child. That had to be Yitzchak. If they went and said, it's not Yitzchak. Yitzchak is not is not the son of Abraham, and therefore Yitzchak is not going to inherit Abraham, right? It's going to be either no one would, and therefore God, right, wasn't honest, and therefore it's not true, or it's Yishmael, right, which means that the Arab nations would actually be the inheritors of Abraham. So they wanted to say it wasn't Yitzchak, but in reality, God showed them, not only by putting it in the Torah, but by making Yitzchak look exactly like Abraham. And that's why it begins telling us this. And then it goes on and it tells us how Yitzchak was 40 years old when he went and he married Rivka, who was the daughter of Besuel, and it goes on and explains who she is, who her brother Lavan was, and then it says here, sorry, that's quite all right, Julie. And it begins, if you look in the English, that Isaac entreated Hashem opposite his wife because she was barren. It says that Yitzchak and Rivka both sat in a room, each one in opposite corners, and they both prayed to God because she couldn't have children. So Hashem allowed himself to be entreated. God answered their prayers positively, and his wife Yitzchak conceived, and she became pregnant. So here we see another example that our mothers of the Jewish nation were all barren. They weren't able to have children. Having children for them was not a simple thing. And the commentaries ask, why is that? Like, if God wanted that they should have children, they wanted the Jewish people to come from them, why make it so hard? Just, you have other things you can start up with, but if I say to you, I want you to have children, and then I'm going to make it hard for you to have children, it doesn't make sense. So the reason is that more than God simply wanted them to have children, God wanted them to pray. God wanted that they should go and pray. Now, this itself is a difficult thing, because if God is good, so here you imagine God is good. Everything God does is good. And if everything God does is good, what? And He wants them to pray. So what He does is He puts them in pain. He makes them full of pain. There's not much in the world that can be worse for a woman who's married and all her friends are having kids and she can't have a child. Now, you can't think of a much more painful thing. So that's what you do to her. And God is good, and He does that. Why? Because He wants them to pray. So come up with something else that they should pray for. Right? That they have to do. It's such a painful thing. And if God is good, then why would He do that? It just doesn't make sense that God would do that. So we understand from this that it's not that God put her in pain just because He wants them to pray. It's just that we need to understand the power of the prayer of a righteous person. When a righteous person, a person who really takes prayer seriously, prays to God, right, that person has an extraordinary spiritual experience, and they're basically putting their will, right, into God's will. That, God, I'd like you to do this, but I want what's best, and you know what's best, and then God will make His will the person's will, and therefore God will say that what's best is what the tzaddik wants, what the person wants, and there he makes her pregnant. It's not just that you pray and then God does it for you. There's an actual effect of the prayers of righteous people that makes it that that the entire world will change. There'll be an effect in the world by such people praying. So therefore, it's not that God's cruel that causes them to pray. It's like this. It's like you say, there's a cause and effect. Right? We say the cause is that she's not pregnant, and the effect is that they pray. But really, it's the other way around. The idea is God wants them to pray, so and that's the cause of making the world a better place. He wants the world to be a better place, so He makes an effect that influences them to pray, right? That gives them the feeling for that, and therefore it's a reverse idea. It shows you really the intensity of prayer. So she prays, and then we get into a very interesting section. It says, now here you have Rivka, and she's pregnant, and it says that she's walking down the street, and and the fetus is jumping around, right? You know how you have the baby kicking, right? So the baby's kicking inside. So the commentaries, said, okay, that's normal, but then she says something funny. She says, Vetomar, and she says, Im kein lama zanochi. Why is this happening to me? Well, what do you mean? How many people you have a child and the baby kicks? And anyways, is that bad? Right? If a woman has a pregnancy, every time the child kicks, she's happy. She likes it. Or maybe if it's all the time, it hurts, but she likes it. After a while, if they don't kick, you're afraid. So why is she complaining? Because the baby is kicking. So the Gemara and the Medrash all explain that there's more to this story. First thing is, the fact is that it says that when she would walk down the street, and Rashi says it here, and she would walk in front of a house where they worshipped idols, the baby would start to move, like it wanted to come out. It wants to worship idols. Then it says she'd walk in front of a shul, or like a Jewish place, a place where Jews would learn Torah, and the baby would move around and want to come out. And she'd say, what's going on here? I got a baby inside of me. The baby is like schizophrenic. He doesn't know what he wants. First, he wants to worship idols, right, and be a pagan. And the pagans worshiping idols is bad enough, but pagans were pretty horrible people. Human life had no special meaning to them. And here she sees, the grandfather Abraham gave up everything to be a monotheist, and then Abraham's son Isaac gave up everything, put his life on the line to be a monotheist. All right, and now he's going to have a baby, and the baby wants to be an idol worshiper, right? But it's even worse is he doesn't. Not only he wants to be an idol worshiper, he wants to be an idol worshiper on Tuesday, and on Wednesday he wants to be a righteous Jew. Like, it makes no sense. How can that be? So she says, Lama zanochi, why is God doing this to me? Like, what's going on here? Right, which is a question we all ask at certain times. So it says, "V'telech lidaroch es Hashem." She went to ask God. So it says that she went to the Jewish study hall and she asked the prophet. She went to ask a prophet, "What's going on here?" And they answer, "V'yomer Hashem la," and God says to her through the prophet, "Shnei goyim bebitnech." You have two children, two nations. It actually says, You have two nations in your womb. You have two peoples in your insides. And it says, right, and it goes on, it says that the power will go from one to the other, and the older one will serve the younger one. That's what he says, right? And so, what does she think about this? Nothing. So she's happy. So now think about this case. Here you have now, before you had a woman and the kid was schizo. Now, the woman's told by God, oh, don't worry about it. Your kid's not like fickle. You have two kids. One of them wants to be a righteous Jew, and one of them wants to worship idols. So she feels better. Could you imagine, would you feel better if God said that to you? If you say, sure, you got two fetuses inside of you. One of them's going to be a great righteous person. Oh, that's good. The other one's going to be a murderer. I said, well, wait a minute. That's not good news, but she's happy. God answers her. She's happy. That would not make me happy. And Rivka certainly was a much greater person than me. I can't even come close to comparing it, right? And yet she's happy. So the commentaries tell us that an answer is that when she thought that she had one child, and that child would jump back and forth between wanting to be righteous and wanting to be evil, that bothered her, because she says, it's one thing if I have a child who's committed to being good, I'm going to reinforce that, and I'm going to make him the best I can. And if I have a child who's committed to being bad, he has commitment. He has desire. I'm going to change it, but he has commitment. He's not just sleeping all day. He's just not taking it easy. He wants to do something. What he wants to do is wrong, but that I can deal with. If he's going to go the wrong way, I have the ability to help change him. But at least I know where he's going, and I know that I have the ability to try to change him. But if I have one child who one day wants to be one way and one way the other way, and he's going back and forth, he's not prepared to make a commitment to anything. He's not prepared to dedicate himself to anything. That's the worst kind of person to deal with. It's like when you're trying to help somebody. If the person comes in and they're in trouble, you try to help them. If they come in and so what do you have to do? Like I do counseling every day, right? And you have a couple comes in and they're having trouble in their marriage. So I always talk to them to make sure that both of them are prepared to do whatever is necessary to fix the problem with their marriage. That they're not prepared to give up. They want to do this, right? And it works as long as both of them want to. But if one of them doesn't care and one of them wants to, it won't work. Because you can't just you can't have, like, let's say the wife wants to, the husband doesn't care. The wife will go crazy. She won't be able to do anything, because one day the husband will be attentive, and one day he'll be selfish, and one day he'll be attentive, and the next day he'll be selfish. He won't care. It is whatever he wants to do, he does. Right? He's not committed to making a marriage. He's just passive. Right? He's like a voyeur in his own life. He's just watching life. He's not participating in life. And that, Rivka said, I can't deal with that. I have a child who's not ready to make a commitment on life, how he wants to be. I don't know how to deal with that. So that bothered her. So when they came and said to her, no, you have two. So the one who wants to be righteous, he has a lot of good character traits. I'm going to do everything I can to strengthen those character traits. Right? The one who wants to be evil, I'm going to try to lessen the flaws and make him better. Because the one similarity between the two of them is that they're committed. Right? They're committed to a path. And I'll just try to do my best to get them on the right path. That was why she felt better. Not because she's happy that one of her kids is going to be a murderer. It's because both of her kids are committed and they're prepared to do something. They're not just simply watching life and taking it easy. So that's why she felt the way she did. All right, so so they tell her you're going to have two nations inside of you, not just two children. It means that you're going to have later we know Yaakov and Esav are two children. They're both leaders of the world. Yaakov leads the Jewish people. He's the father. Even though Avram and Yitzchak are the fathers of the Jewish people, they also were fathers of others. Right? Avram was the father of the Arab world. Yishmael comes from him. Right? Yitzchak is the father of Esav, which today is the Christian world. Right? With the Romans, they came from Esav. Right? That wasn't part of the plan for the Jewish people. But Yaakov had 12 sons, and every one of them, right, was committed to remaining Jewish. So Yaakov is really the father of the Jewish nation in that way, because everyone that came from him is a part of our nation. So this is the child that they're about to have, right? One of them is like that. That's him. The other one, Asaph, is the father of the Romans. Later, the Romans become the Holy Roman Empire, becomes the Christian world, and they have a different way of doing things, right? And therefore, the side of Asaph goes away the other direction, right? So you have two nations inside of you. You have two peoples inside of you. They're going to be very different, these two, right? And ultimately, God's goal was. At first, God's goal was that you're going to have one leader lead the world. That was Abraham. That was Isaac. Right? Now God sees, I'm going to have two. I'm going to have a couple. Yaakov and Esau, if they were able to work together, the world would have come to completion right away. Because you have Esau, who was dedicated to taking and taming the world. Right? He's the billionaire. He's the one who's amazing with business. He's the one who's going to go out and tame the world. He's going to go into darkest Africa and build a city. He's going to make sure everyone's got running water. He is the one who really takes the world and makes something from it. That's Esau's job. Yaakov's job is the spiritual side, to deal with the spirit, right? The personal growth, improving oneself. Together, they're an amazing team. If you can bring those two sides together, you've got twins who will make the world perfect. But it didn't work that way. They were two nations that could work together. And in the way that the prophecy is, the younger one is served by the older one. That is, Yaakov is going to be the main one in God's plan. The purpose of the world is for Yaakov. Esau is going to prepare the world for Yaakov. That was the idea, that the older one will serve the younger. It hasn't worked that way. Right? Esau has not done that. And we have not been meritorious enough to demand it. Right? We have not acted in a way that we are able to expect it. So that's why it says that. So then it goes on, just now she's 9 months pregnant, and she's got twins. The first one comes out, Edmoni Kulo Adera Sa'ar. This one comes out, he's red, like his skin is like full of blood, not blood on the outside, inside, like, really alive and lively. And he's covered completely with hair. In other words, he's like a full-grown person. He's like an adult. He's got body hair. He's got facial hair. He's got hair on his head, right? Which is not the way a child is. And they call him Asaph. Now, Asaph is his name, but if you look at it, it also is Asu, which means done. Asaph was done. He was mature. He was finished. He is what he is. Asaph is a done deal. The way he is when he's born is the way he'll be when he dies. He is a done deal. He's born, finished. That's who he was. V'achar Cain, and after that, Yetze Achiv. The brother comes out. V'yado ochezes v'ekev Esav. And he's holding with his hand the heel of his older brother. You imagine the older brother comes out, right? As he comes out, the hand from the second twin is coming out of the womb, holding onto the heel of the first one, and then he comes out. Did that happen to you? Huh? She has twins, right? So that comes out like that, right? So he's holding onto the first one, it says, by the heel. Vayikra Shmo Yaakov, and they call him Yaakov, which Yaakov comes from the word Akev, which means heel, right? Because he's holding onto the heel, which is extraordinary. It's not normal that a child will be holding his brother like that, right? So there's a lot of meaning behind it, right? That was his first ability to try to subjugate his older brother, to be able to put his older brother in the place that they'd work together. So he's holding his heel. The heel is a very important part of the body. It seems insignificant, but if you injure your heel, you can't do most things. You can't walk. You can't move. You can't change. You can't do things. Your heel is what your whole body rests on, and it's an important part. Right? So then it says, Yitzchak ben Shishim Shana, Yitzchak is 60 years old, Beledesosam, when they're born. That ends that. Now they're becoming children. Now they go from birth, V'yiglu Narim, and now they're growing up. Now Narim is no longer the word for a baby, it's a word for an adolescent. Right? A nar means, and in a negative sense, nar means a simple person, but it also means an innocent. Right? Somebody who's simple is innocent usually. In other words, they're innocent in the way they think. You meet some people sometimes, and they're not stupid. They're simple. They don't see people tricking them. They get taken advantage of. Somebody will sell them something and tell them it's worth $1,000. They'll sell them like the Brooklyn Bridge, right? That type of thing. A person they fall for it because they see the goodness in people. They don't think somebody's going to try to trick me. Right? That's simple. That's what an adolescent is. An adolescent isn't worldly. If an adolescent is raised in a home where people are nice and caring for each other, and the whole environment they're in, everybody cares for each other, they suddenly go into the world and they meet people who try to trick you, they're going to presume everybody cares for each other, right? So that's what it means by a nar. Sometimes if I meet someone, I say, that guy, he's such a nar. I mean, it's like he's so simple. He's got to learn to live in this world. But on a positive sense, it means an adolescent. It means, right? So that's where they are. Vayi Esav ish yodeat side ish sadeh. So now their personalities are coming out. Who was Esav? He was a man who understood how to trap, right? Like hunting. Ish sadeh. He was a man of the field. Yaakov ish tam, and Yaakov was a man. Tam also means simplicity, but in a positive way. In other words, he's without any types of like what's the right English word? He's with complications and how he does things. When you tell the truth, you can be simple. When you lie, you have to come up with all types of things, details and things. So he's simple in that way. He's what?
Naive.
No, naive would be like the first one, like Narim. Right? He was not naive. He was straight. He was straight. You got what you saw. He was who you looked at. You talked to him. He told you. And I'm going to sell you something. I'm going to do something with you. Whatever it is, he did what he said. He didn't do less. It wasn't a trick. You could believe what he said. Right? That's what he was like. Tam, in one sense, means complete. He was exactly the way he looked. Right? He was complete. Right? Now, what does it mean that Asaph was a man of who captured things, a man of the field? So on a simple level, it means he was a hunter, right? And it said that he used to go out and hunt. And it could be learned positively or negatively. In a positive sense, he went out to bring in food for his family. In a negative sense, it meant that he went out hunting, right? And he hunted to do things wrong. And it tells us that he sinned in some very horrible ways. That's what it's hinting at. And another understanding is that when it says that he was a man who trapped, is that actually it doesn't mean that he was a hunter. It means that he used his words to trick people. He was fraudulent. He was like they call a confidence man. He would trick you, and he would convince you of one thing, right, and it wasn't true, in order to get you to do what he wanted, to buy something, to sell something. He'd trick you, right? He'd become your friend, but he wasn't really your friend. He would, it's like sometimes you can walk into a store and you can tell the difference when they're selling on commission or they're on salary. On commission, if they're honest, it's just an incentive for them to work hard, right? But if they're not honest or they want to cut corners, then they're going to exaggerate or lie and not tell you everything because they want to make the sale. Otherwise, they don't make any money, right? A person on salary, right, makes salary if they sell or don't sell. As long as the owner sees that they're putting in the effort, doesn't mind. So here, he's the kind of guy who would use his mouth to trap people. Right? That's what it means. He was a man who went out and trapped. He knew how to trap. They say he used to do it to his father. On the one hand, it says that he used to go to his father, Yitzchak, and make his father think that he was also righteous. And he would say to him, do you have to take like truma on salt? Do you have to like do all of it? You have to take, truma is to take parts of fruits and vegetables, and a portion of it has to go to the temple or to the Kohen. But like something that comes from the earth, like salt, right? You don't take truma on, right? But he used to say how religious he is, right? You would tell him, I'm so religious, I'm asking you questions because I want to make sure I know everything and I do everything right. But really, he didn't care. He was just trying to trick his father. Remember, his father was blind, so his father always didn't know. So he would go and try to make his father believe he was something he wasn't, right? Yaakov wasn't like that. What you saw is what you got. And he was a regular person. Yoshev Ohelim. And while Asaph would go out into the fields to do things, Yaakov sat in a tent. And that's an expression meaning he would sat and study Torah. Right? He learned. V'yahev Yitzchak as Asaph. Now, this is a very revealing statement. Yitzchak loved Asaph. And it says why? Kitzai b'fiv. Because he fed him. Right? He fed him the hunted animals. Or if we use the other understanding I gave you, because he tricked him. he used the hunting of his mouth, right? He used his mouth to trick his father, or simply his father liked meat. Esau would go out and capture animals and feed his father with it, right? So Yitzchak loved Esau because he fed him. But Rivka oheves as Yaakov, but Rivka loved Yaakov. You'll notice a difference in how the sentence is. First it tells you Yitzchak loves Esau, then it says Rivka loves Yaakov. That's fine. That's right. It happens to be that it seems that parents had preferential treatment. Right? They had their favorite. But with Yitzchak it says that he loved Esau because he did something, because he brought him food. But Rivka loved Yaakov, doesn't say why. And this is an important distinction. When it came to Yitzchak loving Esau, he loved him for a reason. And if that reason didn't exist, he might not love him. Right? He didn't love him for who he was. He loved him for what he did. But Rivka, on the other hand, loved Yaakov for who he was. And it's a big difference. Today it's very common. You go to a party. Yeah, you can say a cocktail party, although I've never been to a cocktail party. I don't even know if people have cocktail parties. Right? You can stand around with these funny little glasses and having mixed drinks. But, you go to one of these parties and people ask you, so, what's your name? What do you do for a living? First question, what do you do for a living? Right? Because and you imagine, I'll go to one and I'll say, well, I'm a investigator for Revenue Canada. Right? Well, when I tell them I'm a rabbi, it's not much different. It's pretty much the same thing, right? But because and everyone says, "Oh, right, I'm not going to tell you the next story," right? Right? And if you're Revenue Canada, I'm also not going to tell you either way. So, right? Why? Because in the world we live in, people judge you by what you do. Like I have years ago when I was a teenager. So, there's a well-known woman writer and speaker is Mrs. Heller in Jerusalem. And I was friendly with her husband, right, when I was a teenager. So I would go to their house, and she had not yet developed into a writer or a speaker. She was still a young married woman, but she had quite a few children at this point. Let's say 8, maybe, I don't remember, but quite a few. So she said that she'd meet somebody, like a man, in Jerusalem, not a religious man. The guy comes from America, to visit his kids, and the kids introduce him to their teacher, Mrs. Heller. And so they said, so Mrs. Heller, tell me about yourself. She says, well, I'm the mother of 8 children. And the guy would start talking slow. Oh, that's very nice. I'm so happy to hear. Why? Because what kind of intelligent woman has 8 children? Right? That's all you can do. You're a machine. That's what he's saying to her. And then she'd say, and I teach advanced philosophy in a women's postgraduate program in Jerusalem. And then suddenly he would change how he spoke. Right? Why? Because the world we live in judges you by what you do. Right? So if you're, people think if you're a doctor, you got to be smart. Right? If you're a big businessman, you got to be rich, right? So, if you're, the mailman, it's not necessarily the case. So, but it's not really true. First thing is they judge wrong. Like for instance, when I was a teenager, I used to like doing these tests, intelligence tests, trivia and other ones. So I was about 15, joining Mensa. It's an organization. It's for intellectuals, but I didn't know that. I wasn't much of an intellectual, but I liked it. And I used to take the tests and stuff. So who was I with? I was a kid, but who was in the? There was the mailman was there, and like a guy who sold cars for a living. These guys were intellectuals, right? And in fact, in our family, we had a family friend who was a house painter. He's one of the smartest people I ever met. But because of the war, right? He was a survivor. He didn't get education. He didn't have a career. So he came to America after the war. He had to make a living. So he became a house painter. But the guy knew politics, he knew the economic situations and things, always had very interesting things to say. But, if you'd meet him, you'd say, oh, he's a house painter. Yeah, right, big deal. But he was smarter and more learned than most professors I knew. Right? So, but people judge you by what you do. If I tell you, I'm a enforcement officer for Revenue Canada, you won't invite me to any more parties. Right? That happens when I tell people I'm a rabbi, I get the same kind of thing. So when that happens, right? So because people judge you that way, that's what Yitzchak did with Esau. He judged Esau. He said to Esau, I love you because of what you do. You bring me food. But Rivka looked at Yaakov the way we understand as Jews you're supposed to look at people, which is who they are, not what they do. if a person is kind, if a person is intelligent, if a person is giving, they could do anything or nothing, but you look at that person and judge that person by who they are. So Asaph, who represents the world we live in, right? Asaph really runs this world. The world we live in is run by the children of Asaph, right now at least, and and therefore you go out, people are going to judge you by what you do, just like here with Asaph. In our Jewish world, right, we're supposed to judge people by who they are, not what they do. And that's how we see that the Rivka, who was on a higher spiritual level than her husband Yitzchak, Rivka, as her mother-in-law Sarah, were greater prophets than their husbands. Sarah was a greater prophet than Avram. Rivka is a greater prophet than Yitzchak. So she understood this. So it says, V'yazid Yaakov Nozid, V'yavo Esav min Asada. Now it's a new story. Put it in perspective, Avraham dies, and we learn from last week's Parsha, and they're going to the funeral. So everyone's at the funeral. Yaakov has to make food for the first meal after the funeral. Right? You know, our custom is you come back, you also have what's called the mourner's meal. And what is it? Usually a piece of bread and an egg. So the egg is symbolic, right, of the round, the circle of life, right, life and death. And it's a symbol, right? You could also use lentils that are round, right? The same idea. It depends on your tradition, where you come from. So here Yaakov is making a lentil soup, it says. Vayavo ya Esav min Asada. And Asaph is coming out back from killing animals. He's out in the field. And he's starving. Now, you imagine, he goes out into the field, he leaves early in the morning, and he's spending a whole day catching animals, doing whatever he does out there. He's starving. So he comes in, he wants to eat. V'yomer Esav el Yaakov, hatileni na min Edom hazeh. Yeah, Esav is so hungry, he says to Yaakov, give me some of that red stuff. Right? He doesn't even have time to find out what it is. He doesn't care. He's dying. He's so hungry, right? And he just says, give me that red stuff. Ki oyef anochi, because I'm starving to death. Al kain kara shmo Edom. And because of this, he was always known by the nickname Edom, which means red. Right? And in fact, Rome, in Jewish tradition, is referred to as the Edomites. Right? The ones from Asaph. They were the children of Asaph. And Asaph's nation was called Edom. Right? It's known as Edom. You find it in all of our literature that they were the Edomites, and he was called that. But here you're starting to see his personality. Yaakov is preparing for the funeral, right, to people to eat, and Esav comes in and he's so hungry and he's so base, crude. He's a boor. He comes in and he says, he doesn't even say, "What are we having?" Sit down like a mensch and have a plate and something, or wait till the funeral's over and eat. Nope. I'm so hungry. If you don't give me some of that red stuff, I'm just going to die right now. That's what he says then. V'yomer Yaakov. Oh, Yaakov says, wait a minute. Mikra koyom es b'chor secheli. You want this food? Sell me your right of firstborn. Because Esau was born first, right? And a firstborn son has certain privileges. So Yaakov says, listen, sell me your right of firstborn, and I'll give you the food. I mean, it doesn't sound like a very nice thing to do. Your brother's dying from starvation, and you start negotiating with him. It's like it's coercion. The guy's starving, and you say, "I'll give you food," but it's like, you go, "Sure, I'll give you food, but sell me your house for $100. It's worth $1 million. You want to eat? Just give me your house for $100." Right? It's an offer you can't refuse. And so Yaakov does that to him. The Omer Esav. So Esav says, "Hini anochen holchamus. I'm dying, for God's sake. Lama zeli b'chora. What do I care about being the firstborn? I'm going to die, right? It makes no sense to me. I don't need a b'chora. So fine, take it. The Omer Yaakov yishvali. So take an oath. You may take an oath. Kayom v'yishvalo. And he took an oath. And he sold the right of being the firstborn to Yaakov. Yaakov nosan Esav lechem. So Yaakov gave him bread. Nazi to Dashim, and he gave him the soup. And he ate. He ate, right? And he was satisfied. And he got up and he left. And Esav disgraced the ownership of the firstborn. He disgraced it by giving it away for nothing. Now, I don't know why it tells us that Asaph, disgraced it. We know he disgraced it. We just saw he disgraced it. They just tell you the whole story about how he's basically saying, you have soup, I have a right of the firstborn. The right of the firstborn is worth nothing. It's worth nothing. You want to give me soup for it? I'm coming out ahead here. I'm not paying anything. I'm getting free soup because the right to be the firstborn. What do I care? I don't care. When he says I'm going to die, doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to die right now. It means eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die. Right? Let's eat. I want to eat. What do I care about the world to come and the firstborn? I don't need that stuff. Right? So it says, but they understand that he was coerced. So you'd say, what kind of a deal is this? He's coerced. Yaakov forces him to do this, right? So the Torah adds the line that Esau, right, disgraces the ownership of the firstborn, because even if it was a situation that appears like coercion, Esau didn't care. It was worth nothing to him. He said, I don't care about this firstborn. It's nothing, right? Even if he wasn't starving, he would say, it's basically. It's like, let's say somebody gave me once like a baseball card. And he said, this is a really special baseball card. And then you save it, it'll be worth something. So what do I know about sports? I don't know. If you tell me it's baseball, I know it's baseball. That's about all I know. I don't know anything about sports. I'm not interested in it. Baseball cards, no baseball cards, right? So, right, someone comes to me and they said, they'll give me like, I don't know, a pair of cufflinks that I might like for the baseball card. That's like giving me free cufflinks because I don't care. Like, baseball card is a waste. You give me an autographed picture of a pitcher. What do I know from a baseball guy? It means nothing to me. So sure, it's like giving me free cufflinks, right? That's what Esau did. Esau says, you want to trade me soup for the right of the firstborn. That's like giving me soup for free, right? So he disgraces the idea of being firstborn. It means nothing to him, right? And that was his sin. It wasn't the sin that he sold it. Because it seems it was coerced. He had no choice. He didn't want to die from starvation, but he didn't care. It meant nothing to him, and that meant that he was totally oblivious to the idea of what it meant to be a firstborn child and what he would gain, which is responsibility, and with responsibility comes privilege. And he didn't want that responsibility. He didn't want to take care of his mother. He didn't want to have to be the ideal son for his father. You can do that. I just want to go and hunt and eat. So he that's what it says, that he went and he did that. What do I care about this firstborn? And so that's how he says that. And that ends that segment. And that really has, up until now, what we have done is we have defined who are these two young men. Esau is a wild man. He has nothing holding him back. He has no restrictions in his life. He just is, he just wants to do what he wants to do, and he wants to do it now. That's who he is. Esau is totally free. If you have money, he wants money, he'll just kill you. He doesn't care. He'll do it. Whatever he needs. Right? He's the ultimate godfather. From him, all the godfathers come. Right? Yaakov, on the other hand, is totally devoted to the mission that he was born for, which was the mission of bringing monotheism in the world. He got from his father and his grandfather, and he wanted to carry on in that tradition. And he realized that if he wasn't the firstborn, that he would lose on some of the ability to do what he wants to do, and Esau doesn't want to do it. Because, for instance, to be the firstborn, you receive a blessing for the spiritual world. Because you imagine, this is how Yitzchak was looking at it. Yitzchak says, my son Esau is an amazingly powerful person, right? He's persuasive, he's powerful, he can do anything in this world. He can build buildings, he can organize people, he can make this world into something. But what he doesn't have is a spiritual life. So I'm going to bless him with spirituality. That's what Yitzchak says when he's about to die. And Yaakov has everything spiritual, but he doesn't know a screwdriver from a hammer. So he says, I'm going to give him the blessing that he should have what he needs in this world to live. He should have money, right? Because he already is going to have spirituality. I'm going to give him that. So, but Rivka understood later on that that's not the way it has to work. Yaakov has to have the spiritual blessing so that it matures his spirituality. And Esau doesn't care about spirituality, so the blessing will be wasted on him. He won't even use it. So he should have the physical blessings. Right? The opposite of what Yitzchak saw. And Rivka, being a greater prophet, she understood that that's the way it had to be. That's why she tells Yaakov to go trick your father, right? Which we're going to get to. Right? So That's really the idea behind it, and I think we should go up and look at this. And if we have time, we'll go back to some of the other stuff. If we look on 134 and 135, here it says, "And it came to pass when Isaac had become old, and his eyes dimmed from seeing." So here, Isaac's going to die. He's old, and he's blind. And he summons Esau, his older son, right? So because as far as Yitzchak knows, this is his firstborn son, right? He's going to get the blessings for the firstborn son. He doesn't know that he sold the blessings, right? And of course, Esau, his word doesn't mean anything. He's going to take the blessings for the firstborn son, even though he sold it. So he says, "My son," and Esau says to his father, "Here I am." And he says, "See, I've aged. I know not the day of my death. So sharpen, if you would, your gear, your sword and your bow. Go out to the field and hunt game for me. Go get some food, right? Food that I like to eat. And then you'll come in with that food, and I'll eat it, and I'll be happy." And prophecy, in order to have prophecy, you have to be happy. So I'll be happy, and I will bless you when I'm happy. And that'll be good, so that my soul may bless you before I die. So that's what he says to Esau. And off Esau goes to go catch the animal to be able to bring to his father. Now Rivka is listening, and she hears what Isaac says to Esau. And Esau goes to the field to get the animals. But Rivka says to Jacob, "Behold, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau, and he said, 'Bring me some game and make me delicacies to eat, and I will bless you in the presence of Hashem.' So now, my son," she says to Yaakov, "heed my voice to what I'm going to say to you. Go out, get from there 2 goats, right, little goats, and we're going to kill them and cook them and bring the meat to your father the way that he likes to eat. You bring it there, and then he's going to bless you instead of Esau." Right? She wants him to trick her. Yitzchak's blind, right? So he has twin kids. There's got to be some resemblance of some sort. So even if he sees shapes, he doesn't see who they are, right? So then bring it to your father, and he'll eat, and he'll bless you. So Jacob says to his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm smooth-skinned, right? My father will feel me, right? I'm going to come in. My father's going to put his hand on my arm, or on my head, to give me a blessing. He's going to see I don't have hair all over. I'm not Esau. He's going to figure it out, and he's going to curse me because I tried to trick him, right?" So, but his mother says, "Your curse is on me, my son. Just listen to what I say and do what I told you." So she tells him, "I know better, right? He's not going to curse you, but if he curses you, I'll get it, not you. You're not doing anything wrong." So he went. He got the food. His mother cooked it. Right? Rivka then took her older son Esau's clothes that she had, like when he would go out hunting, he wore his regular clothes. When he would go, Esau was very good in the mitzvah of honoring his parents. So when he would go see his father, he put on special clothes that would be respectful for his father. So they were in the house because he went out hunting. So Rivka takes those clothes and gives them to Yaakov, right? So that he should wear them. And then it says with this, and she took the skin of the goats that she made food out of, right, for Yitzchak to eat, and she puts the skin on his arm, so that when Yitzchak touches Yaakov, he'll feel the skin of the goat, which is hairy, and think it's Esau, right? So she places the delicacy and the bread which she made into Jacob, and says, "Now go." And so he says, he goes to his father. He says, "Father," and he says, "Here I am." And his father, "Who are you, my son?" The father says, "Who are you?" Right? "Who is it? I can't see." Right? He's blind. So Jacob says, "It is I, Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Rise up. Please sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." So he lies to them. He tells them, "I'm Esau," and he's doing what his mother tells him to do. And here's the food you wanted. Eat the food and bless me. So Isaac says to his son, "How is it that you're so quick to find it? Like, how'd you do that so fast? I just sent you out to go hunting, and already you come back with cooked food. That's amazing." So, and he said, "Because Hashem, your God, arranged it for me." So he tells him, remember, he's talking like Esau, so it's your God, because Esau's already a non-believer. So he says, "Hashem did it. Your God made it so that I should be able to find the food right away for you." And Isaac says to him, "Come close, if you please, so I can feel you, my son," because he's suspicious. Something's fishy here, right? Something's going on. So he says, "I want to touch you. Like, maybe you're not Esau after all." So he touches him, right? So Jacob drew close to Isaac, whose father who felt him. And he says, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's hands." Because he hears the way Jacob spoke, because Jacob always spoke about God. right? He was spiritual. Esau talked about physical. He was like a truck driver. He didn't talk about God. So, and you see here, God arranges this for me. How is your soul? Right? He speaks in a spiritual way. So he says, well, this is the voice of Jacob, right? But it's the hands of Esau, because I'm touching you, and it's all furry, like Esau. So he's a little confused, but he falls for it. Now this line is a very famous line. The Talmud tells us the voice is the voice of Jacob, and the hands are the hands of Esau, is actually a prophecy that in the future, that if the voice is the voice of Jacob, then it will have power over the hands of Esau. That is, what is the voice of Jacob? Prayer and Torah study. If the Jewish people will pray to God and will study Torah, stay observant as Jews, then they will be able to sustain the power of Esau. But if they don't, then the hands of Esau, right, the military, will come in and subjugate the Jews, which happened throughout history. And that, like the Romans came in and took over Israel and destroyed the Second Temple. They were the offspring of Esau. The Romans acknowledged that they were the offspring of Esau. It's not just our tradition. They believed this to be true. This was true, right? And as long as we weren't doing what we're supposed to do, the hands of Jacob, of Esau, took power. One of the ways they say is that it's not possible to have two major cities in power. If Jerusalem's in power, then Rome will fall. If Rome is in power, Jerusalem will fall. It's the same idea, right? That the voice of Yaakov and the hands of Esau. If the voice of Yaakov is powerful, then the hands of Esau will not be able to hurt you. If the voice of Yaakov is not powerful, then the hands of Esau will be able to hurt you. So it was a prophetic line, even though here it's also meant literally. That I hear you talking, you don't sound like Esau, but you certainly feel like Esau, so it must be Esau, right? That's what he says. But he didn't recognize me because his hands were hairy, like those of Esau's brother, so he blessed him. Right? And he says, you are indeed my son Esau. And he said, I am. And he said, serve me and let me eat of my son's game, that my soul may bless you. And then Isaac says to him, come close if you please, and kiss me, my son. He drew close and he kissed him. He smelled the fragrance of his garments and he blessed him. He smelled, right? He was wearing Esau's clothes, right? Esau's clothes smelled like the field. He was outside in the field. He smelled it, right, on a simple level. So see, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of a field, which Hashem has blessed. And may God give you the dew of the heavens, the fatness of the earth, the abundance of grain and wine. People will serve you, and regimes will prostrate themselves to you. Right? Basically, he tells Jacob the blessing that is supposed to be for Esau, which is you're going to run the world. Right? That's what he's basically saying. And blessed be he who blesses you. So you'll be a spiritual individual, and the whole world will bow down to you. That's what he's telling, because Yitzchak didn't really understand who Esau was. Esau could have been an amazingly powerful person. He had the ability to run the world, and if he had acknowledged God in his life, he would have been the perfect person. But he failed, right? So therefore, he gives this blessing. It's supposed to be for Esau to be able to do this, and he gives it instead to Jacob because he doesn't know, right? So it says, and it was when Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely left from the presence of Isaac, that Esau comes in. Now, Jacob's leaving after getting the blessing, and suddenly Esau shows up with the food, ready to feed his father. Right? And he says to his father, let my father rise and eat of his son's game, so that your soul will bless me. And Isaac looks and says, who are you? Esau was just here. Who are you? You're certainly not Yaakov, not the way you're talking. So who are you? I'm your firstborn son Esau. So it says that Isaac trembled with great perplexity. He realized, I blew it. I gave the blessing to the wrong son, and the blessing is going to happen, right? And he's afraid now. Where is the one who hunted game, brought it to me, and partake all of when you have not come? And I blessed him, and he's going to remain blessed. Mm-hmm. You can't take back a blessing. When Esau heard these words, he cries out. This is I find this a very sad statement. Here Esau cries his father, and he says, bless me too, father, right? Is there no more blessings for me? Because I've done so bad, do you not care for me? You don't love me anymore? So he says, your brother came with cleverness and he took your blessing. He tricked me. So he says, I know why, because his name was Jacob, that he outwitted me these 2 times. Esau says, why? Because the name Yaakov, I told you before, means heel. But it also means to trick. Yaakoveni is to trick me. And so Esau is playing a play on words. He's saying, Jacob doesn't mean, you didn't name him because he was the heel, that he would hold on to me and together we would conquer the world. You named him that because you knew he would be He would trick people. When Esau's the one who tricks people, not Yaakov. And he says that Yaakov tricked twice. Once when I made me sell him the firstborn, he tricked me, and now he tricked me by taking my blessing. But if the first time he made him sell the firstborn rights, he didn't trick him. And then Esau comes in to get the firstborn rights, even though he sold them. And nevertheless, Esau says it's his fault. Right? It sounds common, right? You know, you listen to the politics on the radio, right? The politicians do all these crazy things, right? And they say it's your fault. They got this Mike Duffy now on the radio. I mean, right, talking about him. I don't know what the truth is, but he's saying it's not me. I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't do anything wrong. I know I took all of this money I was supposed to take, but the prime minister told me to do it. Right? It's not my fault. It's you. You did it. Right? Right. That's the same idea. That's what's happening here. He says it's all Jacob's fault. So bless me too, Father. Right? He tells him. So he says, he took away my birth. First he takes my birthright. Now he takes my blessing. Don't you have a blessing for me? Right? It's very sad. Huh? And Isaac answers, behold, the Lord that I made him over you. Listen, I made Yaakov over you. And all of his kin shall I have him as servants, and he's going to run it. What can I do, my son? Esau says, have you but one blessing, Father? You can only bless one of us? Bless me too. And Esau raised his voice and he wept. And he, of course, appeals to his father as being a father. So Isaac answers him and he gives him a blessing. Behold, of the fatness of the earth shall be your dwelling, and the dew of the heavens from above. By your sword you shall live, by your brother you shall serve. Yet it shall be that when you are aggrieved, you may cast off his yoke upon your neck. So he says, you're going to live by the sword and die by the sword. You're going to take over the world. And Yaakov is going to be in charge. You're going to have to listen to him. But if he does something wrong to you, you can rebel against him. That's the blessing. And that's exactly what happens throughout history. Right? That the Jews don't do what they're supposed to do. Rome stands up to them and destroys our temple, takes our people, destroys people, murders people. That's exactly what happened. So Esau then hates Yaakov, right, because of the blessings which his father blessed him, right, and that pretty much ends this part of the story. It goes on a bit more, but at this, because then Rivka hears about it. Rivka sends Yaakov away so that Esau shouldn't kill him. Right? But this whole story, first, since an interesting thing, it says the fatness of the earth. What is the fatness of the earth? So Rashi says, fatness of the earth was Italy. Is Italy. Back then they said it was Italy, which of course is Rome, which of course is where the Roman Empire was, which of course is where the Vatican is, right, which took over for Rome. All right, if you ever go to the Vatican, I went to the museum, you can clearly see the progression from paganism to Christianity. They're different than us. We say you have to destroy idol worship and paganism in the world. You have to destroy it. There should be no sight of it. Take the idols and turn them into dust. And they said, no, you take paganism and we're going to transform them to Christianity. So if you go into their museum, they got all of the idols, literally the idols that people used to pray to, right? Beautiful, beautiful giant idols. And they changed their names. This is Saint so-and-so and Saint so-and-so and Saint so-and-so, when really it's Zeus and this guy and that guy and all these different things. It's amazing to see. And they have that concept. We are the opposite. So you can see the progression that they're in Rome, and it goes straight through. In fact, a lot of the rituals that the Pope does were the same rituals that the Roman emperor did. Like, for instance, when the Pope goes out, he has an entourage, and different members of the entourage carry different things. One carries an orb, like this round thing with a cross on it. One carries a spear. They have different things. And the Roman emperor had the exact same thing. One had an orb, one had a spear. It was exactly the same. And they say it was. It's not like I'm smarter than them. They acknowledge this because they're carrying on the Roman Empire as Christian, right? And that's what Esau got. Right, so this is the story of Esau. Now, there's a number of things to talk about which we really can't because our time is pretty much up. But we really should try to understand why Yaakov allowed himself to lie when we know that the essence of Yaakov. Everyone has an essence. Abraham was kindness. Yitzchak was strength. Yaakov is truth. And here he lies. He tells his father, "I'm Esau." Right. So there's ways to understand it. But there's one other thing is that, if God wanted that Yaakov should be the firstborn and he should get the blessings of being this spiritual, why did he make him second? Make him first. They're both in there anyways. It's just a matter of reversing the role. Why did you make Esau come out first? So there's an interesting point, and you're going to find this over and over again if you start looking at the Torah. And we don't have time today to go through it, but maybe if we remember, we can do some of it next week. After the Torah is given, you have to go by the results of something. In other words, the fact of what you have in front of you. And that the means do not justify the end. You have an end and you have a means. Right? How something ends and how something is. If you have an end goal, you have to act appropriately to get to that end goal. You can't steal to give charity, right? But before the Torah things were not done by the end. It was by the potential. So you'll see, for instance, I'll say, if you have a hole in the ground and you have 2 rocks and you drop 2 rocks in, right? So which one is in there the longest? The one you put in first, right? So which is the one that's the longest would be the oldest, right? So which one comes out first? The one you put in last. That was the youngest. So in the days of the Torah, right, the conception, like the conception was that before the Torah was given, was defined as to the end. So Yaakov was the first one conceived if he was the last one out, so to speak, right? Because Esau was closer to the entrance to the womb. The first one conceived would be in further. I know that kids move around. I'm using an example. But inside, Yaakov would be older because he was created first. But Esau was born first. So in our world, that's the reality. Esau is older because he was born first. But in the world of pre-Torah times, Yaakov would have actually been older, and he would have therefore justified to have the firstborn. Right? But in this world that we live in, it's after. It's when you are born. So you have many examples where this happens, where you see that, like for instance, that Yosef becomes the head of his brothers. He's not the firstborn, and the firstborn there loses it. You find time and again, like you have Yosef's sons. He has 2 sons. The younger one ends up being more powerful than the older one. The older one is smaller, and the nation is smaller. It's weaker. The tribe. The younger one is greater. You find time and again that the second one, the younger one, turns out to be greater than the first one. And after the Torah, we don't care about that. We say, who's the firstborn? If you have triplets, the firstborn is the first one that comes out. Period. There's no argument today. But back then, there was a concept that could be different. And based on that idea, there was a feeling that Yaakov had this original intent that he would be special and different. But in any case, that's just a side point. But the bottom line is that we should discuss one time why it was that Yaakov lied. We did talk about it before when Abraham lied, and how lying is not an absolute. Right? You're not allowed to murder, not allowed to rape or steal, but it doesn't say in the Torah you're not allowed to lie. It says you should distance yourself from a lie. You should not lie, but sometimes you have to. But there are rules. Right? And if you do it too much, you become a liar. Even if you do it correctly, even if your lying is necessary, if you do it all the time, it becomes easy to lie. So you'll notice 2 things. One is that they'll lie to benefit a greater good, not to benefit themselves. Right? And when they lie, they don't say it straight out. I read it that he says, I am Esau, your older son. That's pretty blatant. That's a bald-faced lie. He is not Esau, your older son. He is Yaakov, the younger son. But if you look closely, the Torah doesn't have punctuation. So Rashi says, that's not what he said. He said, who are you, my son? He said, I am. Esau is your older son. Meaning, I'm Yaakov. I am who I am. Esau is your older son. But we know he didn't mean that. He meant to trick him. So why did he say it that way? Because, as I said before, there are times when you're allowed to lie, which we'll have to explain. But even when you are allowed to lie, if you do it too much, you become a liar. And then you lie when you shouldn't lie. So whenever our forefathers had to lie, they always did it in a way that it could be understood not as a lie. Like, I'm Yaakov. Esau's your older son. Right? It's silly, right, to think that. Or, you have it in many places where it says one thing, and then if you read it at the simple level, he's lying. But if you read it the way that the commentaries say it, it's not a lie. And it's only so that he, on the inside, in his psyche, does not become a liar. Not because he really believes he didn't lie. He meant to lie and he wanted to lie because he wanted to do what was right.